21st of February 1945. Iwo Jima. For weeks, Japanese troops have vanished into a warren of caves and tunnels that artillery cannot crush and tank shells cannot reach. Then something new crawls up the ash slope, a Sherman reborn, its cannon gone, a black snout where the gun once was. It exhales fire instead of shrapnel, a rolling tide of napalm that turns tunnels into furnaces. The Marines of the 28th Regiment, 5th Marine Division, move forward for the first time in weeks. Japanese called it Times Oni, the Demon Tank. Lieutenant Harold Hal Whitaker, Chemical Warfare Service Engineer, seconded to the Pacific Ocean Area's Flame Project, has been getting laughed out of tank parks for 6 months. His pitch? Rip the 75mm out of a Sherman and jam a naval flamethrower into its nose. Replace HE with heat. Trade shells for fire. The tankers call him insane. The infantry calls him late. Whitaker kneels beside the dead Sherman and sketches on its glacis with charcoal. Tank silhouette. A fat cylinder for fuel. A stubby tube where the gun should be. You can't blast a tunnel, he says to Captain Paul Keating, but you can flood it. Not with water, with flame. Keating shakes his head. We tried, backpack flamers. They get killed crossing 10 yards of open ground. Whitaker taps the armor. Then, put the flamer behind this. Back at the beach dumps, Whitaker finds exactly the madness he needs. A Navy Mark I flame projector off a LCT, drums of napalm thickener, a surplus air compressor, and a CB welder, willing to ignore the book for a case of peaches. They strip a shot-up M4, a 3 down to its bow machine gun mounts, brace the nose with plate, and feed a coaxial pipe through the old 75mm mantlet. Behind the driver's seat, they bolt in a 290-gallon fuel tank scavenged from aircraft stores, add nitrogen cylinders for pressure, and route the lines through armored trunks. The bow gunner's seat becomes the flame gunner's station, with a simple hand wheel and a trigger that looks like it belongs on a rivet gun. It's ugly, it's untested, it leaks. Afternoon. The 28th pushes again, at a seam where caves mouth out of a collapsed terrace. Normal drill. Sherman step forward, fire he, back off, satchel teams sprint and die. Flamethrower men get within 20 yards and vanish under MG tracers. This time Hotfoot rumbles up, gun tube replaced by a black, stubby snout with a perforated shroud. Whitaker rides the rear deck with a grease pencil and a prayer he won't admit to. Range, the tank commander barks. 120 yards, Whitaker says, hoping the chemistry holds. The driver inches to a mound that barely hides the hull. A cave wakes and drills the mantlet with bursts that spark and slide. The flame gunner thumbs the valve. Nitrogen hisses. Napalm slugs surge. The projector coughs once, then vomits a sheet of orange that seems to ignore wind and gravity. It hits the cave mouth like a wave, runs up the ceiling, and pours inside. For 3 seconds, nothing happens. Then the earth exhales black. Secondary flames jet from cracks 30 feet away. The machine gun stops forever. Word spreads down the line in 30 breaths. Fire tank. Marines whose world has been rocks and death stand up and cheer like kids at a ball game. Hotfoot traverses left, finds another black rectangle, and lays in a 2-second burst. The flame snakes deeper than a grenade can dream, around corners, down shafts artillery can't see. Air sucks in. The napalm eats it. The tunnel becomes an oven. A position that shrugged off a morning's shelling dies in 5 seconds because a lieutenant drew a pipe through a gun mount and dared the Pacific to argue. By dusk, 6 cave mouths are glossy, with soot and silent. Hotfoot limps back to the beach reeking of burned gasoline and victory. Whitaker slides off the deck, face grimed, hands shaking from more than vibration. Captain Keating claps him once on the shoulder. "You're insane, Lieutenant," he says. "Don't change." Night work under red-lensed lanterns turns a beach dump into a shipyard. The CB who welded the first pipe, Chief Red Mallory, lines up scrap like a surgeon laying out instruments. Whitaker's notebook becomes a checklist, double-walled fuel line wrapped in asbestos cloth, armored trunk through the bow, quick disconnect manifold between the 290-gallon tank and nitrogen banks. A Marine armorer from 5th Tank Battalion, Staff Sergeant Duke Morales, adds a safety cutoff valve within reach of the driver. The flame gunner, Private Sam Ortiz, 20 years old, Jersey dockhand, practices blind drills. Pressurize, pilot, burst, purge. He can run it in 8 seconds without looking. He has to. The nose of the tank is now a faucet that pours fire. The first weakness shows up on D+3. Hotfoot takes a lucky mortar fragment to a line clamp. Fuel mists inside the bow, and a pilot flash cooks the paint on the firewall. The crew kills the flame and drowns the compartment with CO2 bottles, while Whitaker pounds the hull screaming, "Shut it! Purge!" The tank lives, but the message is written in blistered green. Flame tanks don't get second chances. Whitaker doubles the clamps, wraps every joint, and rivets a steel catch tray under the couplings. Then he armors the nitrogen banks. A punctured cylinder is a rocket. The second weakness is tactical. On flat sand, Hotfoot plays assassin. In terraced ash, its short snout can't reach the recessed mouths. Whitaker sketches again, this time a dozer blade bolted to the bow to seal a cave while the projector floods it. The Seabees drag up a blade from a wrecked D7 and burn it onto a second M4A3 hull. The combination looks ridiculous, plow and dragon, but when C Company tries it against a slit near the base of Suribachi, the blade noses into the lip, the projector breathes, and the flame rolls forward and back like a tide under the steel, starving the tunnel of air as it cooks it. The hillside burps smoke from vents 50 yards away. By now, the battalion commander, Major Leland Stark, is paying attention. He watches the second tank work and says only, "How many of these can you make, Lieutenant?" Whitaker answers like Cullen once did. "If you give me pipe, nitrogen, and drivers who don't scare easy, 2 a day." Stark points at a line of hulks waiting for cannibalization. "You've got your donors." Word travels up the beach. The Chemical Warfare Service detachment from POA rolls in with drums of aluminum stearate thickener and the proper Navy E-21 projector head. The ad hoc becomes doctrine. M4. A 3-chassis, bow projector through the mantlet, 290-gallon tank, 6 nitrogen cylinders, dozer blade optional. Someone at regiment writes M4, A3, R3 in grease pencil on a chalkboard. The nickname arrives faster. A corporal taps his lighter on the glacis and grins. Zippo. The Japanese aren't stupid. They adapt overnight. Machine guns shift to flanking cuts to hit the bow. Sappers crawl low with satchel charges, aiming for the track, not the armor. Inside the caves, engineers stack sand-filled oil drums behind the first dogleg as a flame baffle, dig sump pits to catch burning fuel, rig bamboo screens dipped in mud to deflect the first torrent. Zippos stop being magic and start being hunted. Whitaker briefs the fix like a boxing trainer before a second round. "Smoke first," he tells Keating. "You blind their flanks before we nose in." The 13th Marines walk 105 mm smoke along the terraces. Navy rockets stitch the slopes. Infantry stacks tight on the flame tank's shoulders. Each squad with 2 BARs and a man carrying a 5-gallon water can for the inevitable flareback. The tank destroyers set a base of fire to break up sapper rushes. The Zippo works in pulses 1 to 3 seconds to save fuel and avoid cooking itself. Each tank can deliver roughly 30 bursts. After that, it's a steel drum on empty. On D+4, the proof comes brutal and clean. A cliff cave at the northwest spur has already swallowed 2 assault teams. The plan runs, by the book Whitaker just wrote. Smoke screens the flanks. 2 Shermans with 75 seconds pound the embrasures. The Zippo noses in with the blade up. The first burst splashes, runs, and dies on a sand drum. The second punches past the baffle and disappears. There's a pause long enough to hear a corpsman shouting down the line. Then a jet of flame blasts from a vent on the ridge. The cave exhales black and stays silent. Marines move without orders, satchel charges, sealing cracks with blasts that howl and then gutter. Keating's radio man keys the net. Cave neutralized. Time on target, 1 minute, 40 seconds. By the time the 28th plants a flag on Suribachi, there are 6 working Zippos on the black sand, 2 more half-finished under tarps, and a line of infantry waiting like customers outside a new barber shop. Whitaker doesn't salute the flag. He's under a tank with a wrench, tightening clamps with fingers burned raw, already thinking about the next island on the map, the one with a name that sounds like a promise in a sentence. Okinawa. March 1945. Fleet anchorage, Ulithi Atoll. The volcanic rock of Iwo Jima still smolders in memory, but new orders move faster than ash can cool. Next target, Okinawa. Size of a small country, laced with limestone ridges and cave fortresses that make Iwo look like a rehearsal. For Lieutenant Harold Whitaker, it's déjà vu wrapped in nightmare. The report from Army intelligence says it plain. Enemy fortifications extend deep into coral and stone. Entrances fortified. Gun positions immune to artillery and aerial bombardment. Estimate, 60,000 defenders. Whitaker flips the page and sees the line that matters most. Recommend increased use of armored flame equipment. The brass has caught on. He's no longer a madman with a torch, he's a requisition line. At Ulithi, the 713th Flame Tank Battalion forms around a scrapyard of Shermans. Whitaker gets a tent and a sign that reads simply, Flame Shop. The Seabees weld through tropical nights, cutting holes through mantlets, bolting and piping, mounting Navy Mark I and II flame guns. The Army Ordnance teams bring 75mm gun mantlets to balance the weight. They call it engineering. Whitaker calls it surgery. Each tank that rolls off the pier smells of diesel, burnt steel, and promise. The M4, a 3R3, standardizes fast fuel pressure at 300 pounds per square inches, range 130 yards in calm air, 290 gallons of napalm good for 35-second bursts. Whitaker insists on double hull sealing and internal purges. Each tank gets an exhaust-driven pilot light ignition system and a manual valve backup. The crews, many of them veterans from Saipan and Tinian, look at the weapon like they're shaking hands with a demon they plan to ride. Private Ortiz, the original hotfoot gunner, is now a trainer. His lesson is simple. Flame is physics and fear. You don't need a perfect hit. You need a good seal. Let the fire find its way. He makes rookies practice timing bursts, 3 seconds on, 2 seconds off, until they can do it blindfolded. Whitaker watches from the shade, cigarette unlit, notebook open. Every failure becomes a scribbled improvement. Every success, a question. By early April, 60 M4A 3R3S are aboard transports bound for Okinawa. The 713th will support the 6th Marine Division and the 96th Infantry Division in the north. Their mission: clean out the cave belts around Kakazu Ridge, Tombstone Hill, and the Maeda Escarpment, the Shuri Line. To the infantry, it sounds like suicide. To Whitaker, it sounds like exactly what the flame tanks were built for. April 3rd, Okinawa. The Zippos land in pairs, followed by Shermans and bulldozers. The first engagement comes near Kakazu Ridge, where Japanese 32nd Army troops have dug tunnels into a coral escarpment. Artillery flattens the hilltop, but the guns in the caves keep firing. Infantry can't approach. The approaches are zeroed in. The call goes out. Send the Zippos. Tank 22, Hell's Kitchen, moves up with infantry in its wake. The road is cratered and steep, visibility down to 30 yards. The first bunker spits a 47mm shell that rings off the bow like a gong. Ortiz, riding as advisor, taps the commander's shoulder. Closer, 10 yards. The driver inches forward until the embrasure fills the viewport. Now. The projector coughs once, then vomits a stream of orange that looks slow and moves at 60 miles an hour. The flame splashes inside, ricochets off the back wall, and curls out like liquid sunlight. The cave breathes out smoke so thick the air turns gray. The Marines behind the tank cheer, because they know what it means when black smoke pours from a cave. The bunker is dead. Next, the Zippos tackle a network of lateral caves along the base of the ridge. They use a new tactic, Whitaker wrote in a margin note: flame walking. One tank fires a short burst into a side cave. The next tank ignites the escaping vapors from another opening, chasing the flame through the tunnels like setting a fuse. It works too well. A subterranean explosion lifts the ground under the infantry like an earthquake. The tank crews learn to back off 3 seconds faster next time. The Japanese counter with precision. They stack oil drums filled with water and sand behind cave openings to absorb flame. They dig secondary vents that vent napalm vapor harmlessly. They set up artillery observers to call in 150 mm howitzers on any Zippo seen firing. Whitaker walks among the tanks at night, hands black with grease, marking damage in chalk. Driver's periscope melted. Left hose burned through. Bow plate shrapnel fracture. He's designing in real time. Every repair another data point in a brutal experiment. On April 10th, disaster nearly ends the project. A fuel hit ignites tank 36 near Yonabaru. The flame gun ruptures, the tank cooks off, and the crew burns before they can bail. The explosion shakes the battalion. Ortiz stares at the wreck for a long time before saying, "She burned hotter than what she was built to fight." Whitaker spends the night with a slide rule, calculating pressure ratios until dawn. The next morning, he orders all tanks modified with double-walled fuel tanks and quick dump valves. Within 48 hours, the Zippos are back in action. They hit Kakuzu again, this time paired with bulldozers that seal entrances behind them. Infantry watches from foxholes as streams of fire pour into black holes and come out as smoke. A sergeant from the 6th Marines says it best in his report. "We used to fight caves with grenades and guts, now we fight them with chemistry." By mid-April, the line around Shuri begins to fracture. The 713th's after-action reports tally more than 270 cave positions neutralized by flame tanks in 3 weeks. Whitaker doesn't celebrate. He stands beside the latest modified M4, a 3R3. Its projector nozzle scarred, its hull blackened. He knows the numbers that matter aren't on any report. How many caves are still untouched? How many tanks won't make it back? How many gallons of flame it takes to burn a war out of stone? He lights his first cigarette in months, exhales once, and mutters, "The science works. Now we have to survive it." April 24th, 1945. Okinawa. The rain comes hard now, Pacific rain, thick as gravel, soaking men and machines alike. Roads turn to rivers of red mud, and tanks bog halfway to their targets. Yet the Japanese keep firing. Their fortress line along the Shuri Plateau refuses to die. Artillery can't root them out. Napalm dropped from Corsairs slides harmlessly off the slick coral slopes. Infantry attacks end in blood and silence. The front has become a siege of holes. Lieutenant Harold Whitaker is done building. He's fighting. He rides in the lead Zippo, Hotfoot 2, with Ortiz again on the trigger. They're attached to the 1st Marine Tank Battalion, pushing toward the Maeda Escarpment, later called Sugar Loaf Hill, a ridge so honeycombed with tunnels it might as well be an anthill of steel. The Japanese call it Shugyo Toge, training pass. It's the size of a football field and has swallowed an entire regiment in 5 days. "Tank up!" the Marines shout. The Shermans roll forward in staggered pairs. Regular 75 mm tanks lead, Zippos just behind. Infantry hugs the sides, crouched low. Every 100 yards, the formation halts as the ground opens up with machine gun crossfire. A cave spits flame of its own gasoline-filled drums, ignited by Japanese sappers. The Marines hit the dirt. The tank commander slams his hatch. "Fire!" Whitaker yells. Ortiz squeezes the trigger. The Zippo hisses, belches, and spews a river of fire 30 yards long. It doesn't arc, it crawls, hugging the mud, then climbs the escarpment like it's alive. The enemy fire stops mid-burst. Smoke boils up the ridge, thick, black, and final. The Marines surge behind, tossing satchel charges into the black mouths that once spat bullets. A private beside the tank drops his rifle, staring. "I can smell them burnin'," he mutters. Ortiz doesn't answer. He just flicks the purge valve, flushes nitrogen through the lines, and asks for the next target. By mid-morning, the advance slows again. Whitaker climbs out, soaked and shaking, and kneels in the mud beside a fallen Marine. The man's uniform is scorched not by enemy fire, but by a secondary blast from a cave cache ignited by their own napalm. It's the part of this war no report will write down. Flame doesn't just kill soldiers, it unmakes them. Whitaker stares at his hands, black with soot, and wonders if he's building weapons or demons. But there's no time for conscience. The next ridge, Half Moon, is worse tunnels intersecting like veins. Reconnaissance shows enemy tanks parked under overhangs, firing from apertures invisible to ground gunners. The normal Shermans can't even aim high enough to engage them. So Whitaker improvises again. He shortens the flame gun barrel, replaces the nozzle with a bell-shaped diffuser, and adjusts pressure to extend range and lift. When Hotfoot 2 fires, the flame arcs higher, reaching recesses 50 feet up a cliff. The Marines call it the Dragon Spout. It debuts on April 29th. The 6th Marine Division attacks Half Moon Ridge under a storm of rain and shrapnel. Japanese heavy machine guns hold the line from caves stacked one above another. Hotfoot 2 and 2 sister Zippos advance through a curtain of smoke. The cliffs flicker like a forge. The new flame guns reach the upper caves, flooding them in liquid fire that rains downward, igniting the next tier. It's a chain reaction fire, feeding fire. In less than 5 minutes, an entire section of ridge is silent, except for the crackle of burning roots and the hiss of steam from wet rock. By noon, Sugarloaf and Half Moon are half gone. The cost is terrible. Flame tanks are magnets for every gun on the island. One takes a direct hit from a 47mm anti-tank gun. The crew bails out on fire. 2 don't make it. Another hits a mine and detonates like a torch dropped in gasoline. Whitaker watches from a crater, notebook forgotten, shouting orders through a field phone as if shouting could outpace fate. "Keep them covered! Move the infantry up! Keep the fire tanks in pairs!" When the smoke clears, the Marines hold the ridge. They count dozens of caves sealed, hundreds of defenders burned or buried. It's not victory. It's extermination. A captured Japanese sergeant, shaking with burns, tells an interpreter, "We are not afraid of bullets, but the fire eats the air." That night, Whitaker sits alone under a poncho, staring at the island that's still burning in pockets. Rain hisses on molten rock. His men call him a hero. The brass calls his tanks indispensable. He calls them necessary evil. The Zippo had turned a battle of attrition into a grim arithmetic of heat and air. But Whitaker knows the truth. No citation will print. The same chemical miracle that made his tanks work has also made the Pacific a furnace. And the war isn't over yet. Word from the north says the next target makes Okinawa look small. Kyushu. Japan itself. The caves there are deeper, the defenders fanatical, and the planners want 10 times as many flame tanks ready. He closes his notebook, soaked and half-burned, and writes a single line at the bottom of the last page. If hell has engineers, they look a lot like us. June 1945. Okinawa is nearly won, but it looks like the moon pitted, burnt, and crawling with smoke. The 713th Flame Tank Battalion sits among the wreckage, half its strength gone. The survivors are blackened ghosts of machines, armor bubbled and warped, paint scorched off to bare steel. Each one smells faintly of gasoline and carbonized stone. The battle reports read, secured positions. But Whitaker knows better. You don't secure a place like Okinawa. You burn it into silence. The brass wants results, and they got them. The M4A3R3 Zippo has proven itself beyond doubt. Caves, pillboxes, tunnels, none of it survives a tank that spits fire for 90 yards. But the cost is written in charred hulls. For every 5 tanks that go in, 1 doesn't come back. For every victory, Whitaker finds another burned-out wreck with a turret peeled open like a tin can. Each one tells a story written in soot. Still, the orders come down from 10th Army. Prepare for mainland operations. The planned invasion of Kyushu, Operation Olympic, will require hundreds of flame tanks. The Chemical Warfare Lab at Oahu cables him directly. Lieutenant Whitaker, report immediately for design conference. Your system to be standardized for mass production. He's not flattered. He's terrified. At Oahu's Schofield Barracks, engineers and ordnance officers sit around a drafting table covered in blueprints. They call his field creation the M4A3R, 3 standardized assault flamer. They talk about redesigning it for better range, stabilized pressure, higher burn efficiency. They use words like yield, rate, output. Whitaker stares at the diagrams and sees the faces of Ortiz, of the tankers who never crawled out. He interrupts the discussion cold. You're improving the efficiency of cremation, he says flatly. A colonel glances up, unamused. We're improving survivability, Lieutenant. Every yard gained by fire saves lives. Whose? Whitaker asks. No one answers. He spends nights in the machine bays instead of the officers' quarters, watching welders cut armor, inhaling the sweet, metallic smell of fresh napalm. The tanks are better now, dual fuel compartments, electric ignition, water mist shielding for the nozzle, but to him, they look less like weapons and more like factories of horror. He knows they'll work flawlessly. That's what frightens him. Then comes a letter from the field. Ortiz. He's alive. Still in Okinawa. Hotfoot 2 burned out last week. Lost half the crew. I'm training new kids now. They don't understand what this machine does. They cheer when the fire hits. They don't hear what's inside those caves. I do. Whitaker folds the letter carefully, pockets it, and writes back. I hear it too. Late June. Okinawa officially ends. Victory reports flood back. Full of numbers, tunnels destroyed, prisoners captured, flamethrower tanks credited with breaking the Shuri line. The Marine Command calls the Zippo the single most effective weapon for cave reduction. General Buckner's staff sends commendations. Whitaker's name appears in technical notes sent to Washington. He gets promoted to captain, though he barely notices. He's summoned to Guam for a meeting with General Roy Geiger himself. In the command tent, maps of Japan cover the table. Red pins mark Kyushu landing beaches. Black ones mark estimated defenses. Whitaker, Geiger says, your flame tanks broke Okinawa. We're going to need 300 for the next operation. Can you do it? Yes, sir, Whitaker replies automatically. You'll oversee production. You'll have full authority. The president wants every cave in Japan sealed before infantry goes in. Understood? Whitaker hesitates. Understood, sir. He doesn't add what he's thinking. If we go through with this, the whole country will burn. 2 weeks later, a rumor sweeps the base. A new kind of bomb, something atomic, they whisper might make invasion unnecessary. The officers don't believe it. It sounds like fantasy. But in August, word arrives. Hiroshima, then Nagasaki. Cities gone in seconds. The fire Whitaker unleashed in tunnels has now been scaled to nations. He reads the news in silence. Engineers in the next tent cheer. It's over, one says. No more invasions. We're going home. Whitaker walks outside into the tropical night. The air smells of salt and diesel. He looks at the stars and mutters, we built fire smaller than that. It was enough. The invasion is cancelled. The M4A3 R3 production lines stop overnight. Hundreds of finished flame projectors sit on Guam's docks, bound for a war that suddenly vanished. Whitaker inspects one last tank before they're mothballed. The brass calls it a weapon of precision. He knows better. He runs his hand along the soot-scarred nozzle and feels the faint scent of gasoline still clinging to the metal. Ortiz finds him there the next morning, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "They're shipping us home," he says. "Can you believe it?" Whitaker doesn't answer right away. Finally, he says quietly, "Yeah. But what do we do when the fire comes home with us?" Ortiz frowns. "Sir?" "Never mind," Whitaker says, forcing a smile. "Safe travels, Private." The war ends. The Zippos are left behind, some scrapped, others buried in depots across the Pacific. A few remain parked at the edge of airfields, their nozzles pointed at the horizon, waiting for a war that never came. In September, aboard the USS Missouri, Whitaker watches Japan sign the surrender. The deck is silent, except for the clicking of cameras. He's close enough to see the ink stains spread on the paper. Around him, sailors cheer, planes roar overhead, bands strike up victory marches. Whitaker feels nothing. The map is finished, but the ghosts aren't. He thinks of Iwo, of Okinawa, of the sound flame makes when it finds air underground. That night, in his bunk, he writes his final entry. "I built the perfect weapon for a perfect war. It ended before I could stop building. Maybe that's mercy. Or maybe it's because we found something worse." He closes the notebook and never opens it again.